Hey there guys and gals, Anime Dude here, and I want to give a quick thank you to the TeePublic Uproar store for sponsoring this video. They have some pretty cool anime t-shirts and hoodies and whatnot, so if that seems like something that interests you, then check out the link found in the description below. And now without any further ado, let's get to the video. The Baccano anime follows numerous characters through 3 events that differ in both time and place, yet manages to somehow weave them all together into one much bigger story. It rids you of the illusion that stories have beginnings and endings, or even main characters for that matter, and instead reinforces the idea that stories are composed of people living, endlessly interacting with and influencing one another, and then eventually parting ways. Depending on which character you focus on, the same incident will behave like the surface of the ocean, changeless, yet ever-changing. In other words, there may be but one event, but as many stories as there are people to tell them. When growing up, it was this concept that changed my perception on character-story relations, and I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that without this realization, I never would have started analyzing individual characters to the extent that I do. As such, I'd like to pay tribute by individually analyzing some of the characters from Baccano, along with how the events transpired from their perspective. I've unfortunately never read the novels, so any Baccano videos I make will be analyzing the characters solely based on what we see of them in the anime. So without further ado, let's kick things off by looking at Lad Russo. Introduce yourself, Lad, my boy.
Thank you! Fuck you! The star is here!
Over the years, I've often heard Baccano described as a show full of psychopaths, and while this may indeed be true, especially in the case of characters like Lad Russo, I think that oversimplifies things just a bit too much. Defining what exactly makes someone a psychopath is much more complicated than one would initially think, as the definition has been changed a lot throughout the years, and has been subject to many different interpretations. In today's standards, I do think it's important to acknowledge that the Hollywood interpretation of a psychopath that's generally found in entertainment does not necessarily represent most actual psychopaths, and that nowadays, psychopathy is defined as a category of APD, otherwise known as antisocial personality disorder. In actuality, only roughly 1 in 5 people diagnosed with APD are said to be psychopaths. In other words, while I don't think there's a hint of doubt in anyone's mind that Lad Russo is indeed a psychopath, I'm no psychologist, and thus I can't give an official diagnosis. However, while I may not be a psychologist, Lad is a fictional character from a Chinese cartoon. So what I can do is start off by listing some of his character traits that coincide with a core set of traits commonly used to define psychopathy. First of all, Lad is a very violent man, and psychopaths tend to be easily frustrated with a low threshold for acts of aggressiveness, which include violence. It really doesn't take much to get under Lad's skin, and it never seems to end well when people do. Next, psychopaths tend to show a lack of realistic long-term goals and often fail to follow any life plan. The PPI, or Psychopathic Personality Inventory, describes this trait as a carefree non-planness, which honestly describes Lad almost perfectly. This was shown when his uncle heavily advised against his idea that involved him and his friends hijacking the Flying Pussyfoot and then threatening to crash it straight into the heart of Manhattan. Lad considers that he gets to kill by doing this job, and they get paid, so in his mind it's a win-win, yet he doesn't stop to consider any possible long-term repercussions for these actions. This leads us directly into a couple more psychopathic traits that go hand in hand with his inability to plan ahead: impulsiveness and irresponsibility. I personally find all 3 of these traits to be very heavily connected, as they all feed into and aid one another in numerous ways. Much of what Lad does is done on a whim, and combining that impulsiveness with a lack of foresight in turn leads to numerous actions that are far from what one would normally consider being responsible. This is partly why it's difficult for most people to understand his actions, and why he seemed like such an unpredictable character when I first watched the show. Yet once we analyze his personality in greater detail, his whims begin to make sense, or rather they begin to become a bit more predictable than one would initially think. This is partially true because of his overconfidence and grandiose sense of self-worth. And while his confidence may pale in comparison to that of another character in the show, it allows him to gather a rather large myriad of followers to assist his plans. While most of them exhibit behavior showing that they are not quite right in the head, their very presence helps to speak volumes about how important one's confidence truly is. While we've already acknowledged that not all people with psychopathic tendencies are criminals, studies show that they're often very successful and charismatic, with Lad being no exception. However, his arrogance and inflated sense of self-worth lead him to hate the idea of being looked down on by others, which is exemplified through his murderous preferences. He takes great interest in killing those that are confident that there's no way they're going to die. Yet he has sometimes been shown to spare those that have admitted his superiority as they concede defeat and prepare to embrace death. He enjoys having power over the lives of others, personally serving as a divine reminder that anyone can die by his hand. His hatred for those that believe themselves above death, and therefore above him, is the primary cause for the duality found between him and Claire towards the end of the series. It's not at all uncommon for people to dislike being looked down upon, and as such, this aspect doesn't necessarily contribute to his psychopathy, yet the desire to be in absolute control over life and death very well might, considering that psychopaths generally possess a high need for control. Yet far more so than anything else mentioned thus far, there's one prominent psychopathic trait that makes Lad who he is, and one other character trait that manages to far and away separate him from a vast majority of other people that would also be categorized as psychopaths. The primary characteristic most psychopaths are known for is their lack of a desire to, or more commonly their inability to, empathize with others. This is because they themselves have difficulty experiencing emotions such as fear, sorrow, remorse, or even love. And likewise, they don't necessarily understand what others are going through when they experience such emotions. While there are multiple instances where Lad appears to have emotions, they are proven to be pretty ingenuine upon further inspection. Here, take a look at what I mean.
I really do. I really do. There is no God in this cruel, cruel world anymore. Vicky went and killed him earlier. I just know it.
Why don't you just go see what's going on?
Yeah, that's exactly what I should do. I am such an idiot. There's no reason for me to wait in here now, is there? And here I was, thinking I had to behave myself. I'll be back.
Lad acted sad over the death of one of his pals, yet he composes himself so quickly and easily that it becomes apparent that he didn't actually experience those emotions, and simply acted how he thought someone else would normally act in that situation. This is very common, as most psychopaths aren't quite as noticeable as Lad, and there are plenty that outwardly appear to experience the same emotions as everyone else, which plays into their ability to be manipulative when they so choose. There have been multiple cases of psychopathy where their lack of true emotions aren't even made apparent until the scarcity of reactivity in the brain is monitored. Yet while Lad's inability to truly experience most emotions is scary on its own, what's truly terrifying is the thing that separates him from most other psychopaths: his incredibly sadistic behavior. If you've seen Baccano, and if you're watching this and I'm assuming you have, then you know it's no secret that Lad really likes killing, don't you, Lad?
Yeah, that's right.
You see, sadists experience pleasure from inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation onto others. Yet what's odd is that most sadists are said to experience pleasure because they're so empathetic with their victims and perceive the negative emotions they're experiencing as much more extreme than a normal person would. While Lad certainly enjoys humiliating and killing others, I believe he primarily enjoys doing so through the control-centered aspects we talked about earlier, which would in a way distinguish him from most other sadists. Regardless, he truly is a sadistic man who enjoys killing, and as such he uses that pleasure and enjoyment to try to understand some of the positive emotions he sees other people experiencing. What is love? While that on its own can be a question with an immense number of possible answers, it's made all the more complicated when considering the relationship between Lad Russo and Lua Klein. Lua is Lad's girlfriend, lover, and fiancée, and as such he describes her as a quiet little flower that's just the tonic he needs to cure his unique sensitivities. Despite this, he constantly states that he wants to kill her and that she's going to die by his hands. Through the little screen time she gets, she makes it clear that she genuinely cares for Lad, which makes her seem pretty submissive to me, and I don't even think it'd be too much of a stretch to call her masochistic. While these personality traits are pretty much the opposite of a guy like Lad, these two opposites fit together surprisingly well. One such example of this is a conversation they had, where Lad stated that it was his dream to find and kill people that love life even more than she does, while he kills her ever so slowly. She remarks that he could kill her right then and there, and his response genuinely surprised me. He said that there are plenty of other people he needs to kill first, so he won't be able to kill her for a very long time, and that until he does, she should stick by him and be sure not to die. While everything about this conversation and their relationship is twisted, he later risks his own life and sacrifices an arm in order to keep someone else from killing her. While this could have merely been an issue of pride or control, I believe that these actions help to reaffirm the fact that he does indeed care for her in one way or another. So, why would he say he wants to kill someone he cares about? Well, like I said earlier, Lad is a sadistic psychopath who experiences great pleasure by killing others, and as such he associates these positive emotions with the act of killing. I believe this is further proven in the moment immediately after jumping off the train to save her, when he says that he wishes he could kill her right now and forever. To Lad, killing is happiness, and thus that joy plays a major role in expressing what Lad personally perceives as love. Now, I don't know if he plans on literally killing Lua someday, or if the word killing is solely some kind of sick and twisted representation of how happy she makes him, but either way, their relationship is certainly much more complex than it initially seems. Lad Russo is a sadistic man with many psychopathic traits, the biggest of which is his lack of genuine emotions, and therefore his inability to display true empathy. He truly enjoys killing and humiliating others as he exerts his control over whether they live or die, yet he is shown to have the capacity to care for others in one odd twisted way or another through his relationship with Lua, however abnormal it may be. Due to Baccano's short runtime, its myriad of brilliant characters are limited in their screen time, and this includes Lad. Despite this, he manages to provide us with an entertaining presence every time he steps on screen. Also, he loves boxing, and so do I, so Lad for the win, am I right? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to leave your thoughts on Lad, as well as any other character recommendations you may have, down in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching, and Anime Dude out.